Eins, zwei, drei, vier.
You know this word. I don't even have to say it because it's a word that has found its way into the English language as angst or even German angst. And so I don't really have to explain to you. You know that the difference between angst and fear. Fear is like usually a specific, fear of something specifically, and angst is kind of like a strange, diffuse, irrational fear of something we don't know what it is. It's more the better translation of it is dread, probably. That's how we would think of it in English, and in German it's very much the same. In German they use the word Angst as fear, like I'm afraid of the dog. They use it for phobia, which is I'm afraid of spiders. I have an irrational fear of spiders. That's a phobia. But they also use it in the sense that, in the way Americans would use it, as a kind of unclear, kind of general feeling of dread of something horrible going to happen that you can't shake. And so it's the only word I know, where something like this, a strong emotion is attached to a specific nation, a specific people. No one says, this is like, Vietnamese angst. No one says that. It's like, this is like Swiss love. That word doesn't exist. But if you think of Germans, you think of angst. German angst. That's how prominent it is. And it's not, no one's making this up. It really is a prominent, important word and concept in Germany. It's so important that I think they like it. I think they like fear. Fear is a very, very prominent thing in their history, in their politics, in daily life, in talking about things. It's fear is something that it has a bigger meaning, I believe, in German than it does in English. And it's this fear that, there's no reason to have the fear, but it's there. I was talking to, I'll never forget that, talking to a very successful, much respected TV show host about it and about the world that we live in, and we're talking about the low unemployment, everything is good, a stable democracy in Germany, stable economy. She herself was extremely and still is extremely successful and respected. Everything is going right. Everything was going right in her life. Yet she said to me, she confided to me, she said, I still have this feeling that something is going to go horribly wrong, that the disaster is just around the corner. I don't know if it's in my personal life or Germany is going to go down the tubes and there's going to be a war or something, or a plague that just kills us all, or something is going to happen. And she just can't shake that feeling. Of course, it never happened. This was years ago, and she's doing fine and everything is good. But I'm sure she still has this irrational, unspecific, hard to locate fear. And the Germans will, there seems to be no filter, or less of a filter that in Germany against fear than Americans have. When Americans have fear, I think I'm exaggerating a little bit. Of course, Americans are fearful of things, and of course, fear makes them easy to manipulate. They're afraid of immigrants, and so some populist leader comes and says, all these immigrants have to go, or they're afraid of another race. Whites are afraid of blacks because, they don't. It's they're afraid of. I don't know why they're afraid, but still, and so racism arises. That's the same as everywhere else. But it seems to me that Germans have less of a filter. Like Americans in general, mainly would say, well, wait a minute, is there really a reason to be afraid? Let's think this through. Are the blacks really going to rise up and kill us all? Or is that do they just want to have a job and have a family life like everyone else? How realistic is my fear? But Germans, I get the feeling is that Germans look for reasons to be afraid, and they invent reasons to be afraid. You can write, there are bestsellers, it's a long history of best-selling books in Germany based on fears of like a coming future disaster that wipes out German life as they know it. It started with, probably that wasn't the first book even, but one of the most famous book was called The Downfall of the West, The Downfall of the Occident, by Oswald Spengler. And that was I think it was in the 20s, or maybe even a little bit earlier in the 1920s. And, he predicted that the culture is going to hell, and, everything that we had, this great, Goethe and Schiller and Beethoven and Mozart, all this great culture and civilization that worked, and, civil dialogue, and it's all going to pot. It's all going down the toilet. And that book is the contents of the book were not as bad, actually, as people say it is, but what stuck was that title, The Downfall of the West. He predicted the downfall of the West, which never actually happened, or maybe it did happen. But since then, I mean, Second World War is kind of was kind of a downfall. But also, after that, in the not too long ago, there was a guy in Germany who made one bestseller after the other, predicting, Germans having was it not enough children or too many children? No, it was that Germans were going to die out because they weren't having enough children. And so they were all going to die out. In 50 years, Germany would be gone. The German nest would be gone. All the German great tradition would just disappear because no one is having children. And he predicted in the book, and it was a huge bestseller. Huge. And then he went on to write other books, like the internet is going to kill us all because we have no culture anymore, because the internet is taking us away from this, and there is also a general fear in Germany about anything new, anything modern, any new technology. There is no new technology that a German has ever met that he wasn't afraid of. I remember in the 80s, one of the biggest, most important German intellectuals, a classical German intellectual, was on TV, and he was talking about the Walkman. The Walkman. He said, this is the downfall of German culture. It leads to barbarism. It makes us all barbarians. Because, and this was his reason, if you sit in the bus with earphones in your head, you don't talk to your neighbor on the bus. You're going to work in the bus, you don't talk to the guy across from you. And so all communication stops, and we become a nation of zombies. And that will lead to our downfall. Of course, the guy probably never rode a bus in his life. No one sits on a bus going to work and talks to the guy across the street, across the row from him, or sitting next to him. He just wants to get to work. He wants to forget that he's even there. No, that doesn't happen. No one talks to each other on a bus. And so his argument was completely nonsense, just made up out of nowhere. Just made it up. But no one called him on it because they're looking for reasons to be afraid of the future. They're looking for reasons to believe that the disaster, the apocalypse is coming, and it's coming for them. It has Germany's name on it, and it's coming soon. There is no financial crisis that ever happens that doesn't inspire some Germans in some newspaper somewhere to write, this is the end of society. It's the end of capitalism. The Germans are so in love with their fear. They groom it like a racehorse. They cuddle with it. They take care of it like a pet. They feed it like a pet. They think about it constantly like a lover. I think the Germans actually love their fears. I think they want their fears to come true. It would make them feel justified and right and good about themselves if all their fears eventually came true. I think it's like the masochist who loves his pain because it makes him feel. But when I think of Angst, I think of a vulnerability to manipulation. And I think back on World War II, on the rise of Hitler, and in the 20s and the 30s, it was just like in America. Germany was in the Great Depression. It was a worldwide, or a Western world at least, financial crisis that everyone suffered from. Everyone was going downhill. The Germans maybe more than others. That's possible because of reparations for World War I and things like that. And they had just discovered democracy. It was new. They didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know really what it meant. And so all those things. But I think of around that time, in the middle of the Great Depression, in the U.S., Roosevelt stood up and talked to his people. And he said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. He said that. It's a brilliant, brilliant statement. One of the best, most important things that a politician has ever said, I think, because it really tells a lot. And around the same time, in Germany, Hitler was talking to people, and he was saying, not in these words, but he was saying more or less, the only thing we have to fear is the Jews and the Americans and the English and the French, because these are the people who are undermining our culture. They're stealing our identity. They're destroying our economy. They're trying to become our bosses and our rulers. They're trying to repress us. There is a secret conspiracy among these people to destroy us, especially the Jews, but also, the Americans were, with Hollywood culture, they were destroying this great German culture and making everything superficial, and the English too, and the French, and so they're all guilty. So he was not saying, like Roosevelt, filter out that fear and get back to work and do what you're supposed to be doing. He was saying, take that fear and take it seriously and make it bigger than it is, and let's use it to motivate ourselves to find who's guilty of doing this, who should we be afraid of, and to kill these people, basically. So he was taking this undefinable, cloudy, fuzzy fear that people feel, the ceiling of dread, and he was taking it and he was concentrating it to a certain point. And he was saying, it's not about just kind of a general feeling of catastrophe and apocalypse. It's real, and and the reason is, the source of it are the Jews. We have to kill the Jews, and then the fear will go away, and all our troubles will go away. There is a reason you're afraid, and that is the Jews. He took it, he used it to manipulate people, to do horrible, horrible things, destroy, everything that Europe had built up over 1,000 years, and also, really bloodily, 5-6 million Jews, in the whole. I mean, the fear, this amorphous, indefinable fear was so strong that it made people easy to manipulate to do the worst things that they've ever done in their lives, things that they could not imagine, that they would never imagine doing before that. But if you can manipulate that fear, if you can use that fear, you can have complete control over the souls of people. And that's probably not the only reason he was successful and the only reason Germans did what they did. But I do think it's a large reason, and I see that fear still today. And if you let the fear go, if you support it and grow it like a plant, it will at some point destroy you. Because Roosevelt was right. The only thing we have to fear is the fear itself. The fear is the problem, not the thing we're afraid of.
1, 2, 3, 4.